I spent, the first probably 50 years of my life dissociated, so I couldn't actually live in my body because it was, in fight or flight, and there was a stupid sensations in my body. Most of us distract from that. We'll reach for a drink, a drug, a screen, a food, when we sit still.
Anything. Yeah.
Yeah, still, it's like, oh, I can't actually, oh, there's too much here. And it's sort of unconscious. It's an unconscious thing, but there's a feeling of, I need to reach something to distract because the sensations that are residing in my system are too much. It's overwhelming.
Hey going guys, today's episode I have a great guest, Tree Wiseblood. She is, I sort of came across her through her Kundalini Awakening experience, which she's talked about on a variety of podcasts and other places. And Tree works as a spiritual mentor. She does Kundalini support. She's a certified global TRE instructor, which we get into in the conversation and I think is a really interesting area and will be into the future for people. Transformational body worker and a healer, and I'm sure many other things. And Tree has a beautiful website, Awakening Through the Body, which sort of tells you everything that you need to know right there in the title. And that's the topic of today's discussion, Awakening Through the Body and trauma, TRE, Kundalini, just sort of coming home to the body and regulating the nervous system and how visceral the awakening process can be. It was a great conversation, and it was great to have Tree on. And with no further ado, here's Tree Wiseblood.
I'm amazed that I actually managed to download music and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yep. No dramas. That's all good. And so I'll give you a proper introduction in post and things like that. But just out of the gate, I came across you, Tree, in my sort of search around on the internet. Essentially, the skinny of it is I went to a Vipassana meditation retreat and had a really intense awakening in the body. And I had no conceptualization that was possible. You know what I mean? Like I had a meditation practice, for a couple of years, more and more intense, built up longer and longer of sits. And then I went on the retreat thinking, hey, this will be cool. I'll deepen my meditation practice, and had this really intense run in with the how embodied this ancient wisdom in the body, you know what I mean? This embodied process, and it just totally caught me by surprise, because I tend to be a bit more intellectual, a bit more sort of in the head, you know what I mean? And I resonate a lot with some things I've heard in some of your interviews. I was sort of really sensitive and sort of stuck in fight or flight sort of for the whole of my life up until I had a variety of experiences, and then that meditation practice, and I was just beginning to sort of unravel a little bit, and then the stuff in the body really just caught me by surprise. And so I did a bunch of research on the internet. I've had a bunch of conversations with different people. Your account really struck me as one that got pretty close to the real viscerality and embodied nature of it. You know what I mean? The wild sort of in the body. A lot of people seem to intellectualize it, and it's so integrally and wound up with the body. You know what I mean? So that's just the framing of I want to focus there, and I think you're a great person to talk to there, because awakening through the body and all of that thing, you've really sort of put the focus there. And so that's sort of where I wanted to jump off in terms of that side of things, is just really to focus on the body, the experiences. I don't necessarily think we need to rehash as much as you want to, you're welcome to, but your whole story, you know what I mean? I think you've recorded that in multiple other places, and I don't want you to broken record yourself and just constantly have to repeat that for hours and hours, you know what I mean? But I really want to focus on what your experience of awakening in the body, and did you expect it to be so visceral in the body, and sort of a bit of what your journey was like coming into the body versus how how you started things and what that process was like for you. Does that sort of resonate?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Do you want me to start now? Or
Yeah, go
we're
for it.
all
Yep,
okay.
we're all good.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the body is such a part of it, and often when we've been in that fight and flight state, and it's converted to freeze, it's gone further to freeze. So frozen moments in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Often when we just sit quietly like that in meditation, the body starts to come out of freeze. So it starts
Yep,
to move and come alive again. Now, whether that's Kundalini and I'm a TRE instructor, trauma,
yep,
tension release exercises.
yep. I want to
Um,
talk about that in due course. Yeah, that's really interesting.
so anyone can activate. Not necessarily Kundalini. Is it Kundalini? Is it the spontaneous movement that the body used to heal itself? Is there a connection there? Sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel that people are really just coming out of freeze, and that's fantastic. That's beautiful because the
Yep,
body is starting to unwind, contraction and fascia. Uh, For me, the Kundalini process and the TRE process, there is a little separation, and yet sometimes they are combined. And look, TRE is really just a technique to invoke what
yep,
is already naturally within us, which
yep,
is that unwinding. And
yep,
yeah, so the body experience has been phenomenal, both with TRE and Kundalini. For
yep.
me, I would say where a lot of people contact me and they're coming out of freeze and their body's just starting to move. And I think fantastic. And a lot of people are quite frightened about that, whereas no, it's healing. But if you learn TRE, you've got a way to regulate it so that it's not cathartic and you're over traumatizing your system.
Mm-hmm.
So you're letting steam out of the pot, letting that integrate, and in that integration is the healing space. So some people just feel like it's Kundalini and I just let it go. It may be, it may not be, it may just be spontaneous movement, healing movement, which is, I
Yep.
feel like a little bit different to Kundalini. So with
Yeah,
me,
Kundalini is sort of that like it's got its own momentum sort of thing. You know what I mean? You're not just opening the valve and letting out the steam. It's something else. It has its own sort of momentum, but it is the same sort of fundamental thing, isn't it? Like
yeah,
what's
there's a
happening there.
similarity, but I can see differences because with my TRE practice, I can say to my body, you're allowed to tremor, and I can let it tremor and release fascia and trauma and tension.
Yep.
Kundalini, however, came with all sorts of different aspects like heat. It was, it's the divine waking up within you. And what I would describe first of all, for me was a rising. And I think Joan Harrigan's work she's super technical and brilliant at this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening recently to an interview of hers, and I can now see that my first rising in my late 40s in 2009, when Kundalini started to rise, I feel that she has described what I had as a Saraswati channel. So it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
up Shumna channel, it was Kundalini sort of awakened through trauma. And so with
Mm-hmm.
that came, yes, the movement, uh, heart chakra opening and third eye opening. So it was sort of a little bit of what people call a deflected rising.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so my life became very visionary. There was a lot of visionary work, a lot of healing with subtle realm. And there was just a beautiful, gentle spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I would say my heart chakra opened to unity consciousness during that. So we talk of like spiritual awakening and the head awakening, the heart awakening, the gut awakening, processes that this body's gone through. But my heart awakening came first. Now, with that was like the heat and the burning off of all the dross with the Kundalini. But it
Yeah.
wasn't sorry, I find this word hard to say, Sushumna channel
Mhm.
straight up through and through the crown.
Mhm.
Mm. And this happened in my body and I find sacred science really helpful. So sacred science and obviously Shakti part of someone that has the divine coming through them. It sort of
Mhm.
spreads like wildfire. If the
Yeah.
wood is dry in the other body, it'll
Mhm.
ignite. Um, and then I think I had to go to that sacred site, and this was actually at Muji's ashram in, I think, my memory of all this stuff is sort of,
Mm.
gone, but, maybe 2019, I think. And I had this steam train effect through my body, through my feet, like heat and just like the divine erupting through the body. And so obviously it came down out of that channel and came right up through
Yeah.
with, again, so much heat and just bursting up through the body, and the body just flicked and shook massively. And within that, there was a bright white light in my head. So the crown chakra had expanded. Uh,
Mhm.
so for me, they were sort of the two, one rising up through another channel, and then the one coming through.
Yeah.
And so for me, the energies were different to TRE because, or spontaneous movement when we're coming out of freeze, because, I don't have visions when I'm tremoring.
Yeah.
I don't have that heat unless I go into fight and flight, and then I should stop. It was a different
Yeah.
sort of, it wasn't the heat of fight and flight. It
Yeah.
was the heat of the divine waking up and burning off the.
Can that TRE process, can it get as fully fledged as the yoga postures and the mudras and all of the stuff, or is that more Kundalini? Do you think like is the TRE a more of a fundamental like a more rudimentary sort of shaking and the body sort of shaking it off rather than all of that really? Because the just how delicate and choreographed and precise the Kundalini stuff can be is seems really mind blowing to me. And I haven't got a lot of experience with the TRE, so I don't know where the boundaries are there. But I'm very interested in that. I've only done the TRE. I heard you talk about it in an interview. I listened to David's book, and then I tried the process, and it was a bit hard to fight off because I've constantly got the Kundalini as soon as I relax volitional control, I go off like immediately, like, within a millisecond. And so it was a little bit hard to isolate that process from the TRE, but I did get the tremors going, and I could sort of see it. Almost seems to me like the Kundalini process is more advanced automatic TRE in a way, because my body seems to go immediately to the spot that it wants, that where I least want to look biologically, you know what I mean, and viscerally, and it'll take me to the most resistance and pain. And my process is always I'll have to release, totally surrender into it, every fiber, and it often comes from the root, like, where you would fold when you go fetal, that the last little bit of holding is always there, and when I let go there, it'll melt, and then it'll go to somewhere else and go deeper or whatever, and that it just leads me straight there, and those spots are all over my body, and it'll go back and forth and everything. So is the TRE able to get really like that, or is that more of a Kundalini in your mind? You know what I mean? Does it do the mudras and the yoga postures and the crazy stuff, or is that? And I get as well that what you're saying there in terms of when the Kundalini process is rolling, it you are in a different space. You know what I mean? Like, especially at times it's more intense. Sometimes I'll be woken up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., and I'll wake up to my body moving, and then I'll go into the spot just behind me here. I've got some mats down, and I'll let it roll. And it's a visionary, it's an inner world almost. Like it's like outside is doing what it wants to do, but I'm very present, and there's visions, and it's a totally different state of consciousness to a normal frame. You know what I mean? It's like I close my eyes and I go into that space, and it's a totally different interaction with the world. And so does the TRE? How deep does it go in your experience? Like, have you seen people without the Kundalini active? Do they go in and then go all the way, or is that a different process entirely?
I've been to a lot of TRE workshops, and in my own body, originally I had Kundalini rising, and then I did TRE for trauma healing, and
Yeah.
I feel like it does the more gross bodily ones. I'm not feeling that people they stay embodied too, so that they can regulate the process. So we're
Yeah.
not sort of vast and spacious with it. We are actually embodied with it.
Yeah.
The differences. Now I tremor, and I'll sometimes end up with mudras and sacred dance gestures. Now,
Yeah.
after Kundalini, but in Kundalini classes, people don't start like that. I don't feel they may end up
Yeah.
like that. I feel like maybe this is paving the way through the more gross traumas, bodily traumas,
Yeah.
so that Kundalini may be able to
Come forth after that when there's enough space. Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it can be helpful to clear the body before Kundalini, so that it's Kundalini is then got less to clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my tremoring process, I don't have the dakinis dancing me, or Kali coming into me, or I can be Jesus walking along as Jesus. Like those things aren't happening to me in a TRE process. So
Yeah.
for me,
There's not as
it
much of
isn't.
that space. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, because into that space with the Kundalini, it almost does feel at times like you're totally out of the way, like you're something else has taken your form and is inhabiting it and giving it a good stretch or doing whatever it wants. But it distinctly feels like I feel like I don't exist at a lot of times during that process. Like when it really rips and I'm able to really surrender, and in with a surge of whatever that is of the Kundalini, it seems to surge for me, and at times, and like I've had times where it fully takes over, and I've fallen asleep back here, and I've moved the whole time that I've been asleep, and then I'll wake up and it's been 4 hours and I'm still moving. You know what I mean? And really, when it early got going in me, I would go to sleep with it working, and then I would wake up with it working. Like it was a 24/7 physiological sort of thing, which was really mind blowing. You know what I mean? But now that's just normal to me. But like it just happened the other month. I was tired, and the body sort of shuts down, and something else just takes hold, and it almost seems strongest when either the left hemisphere or the mind is tired. You know what I mean? The mind gets tired, and you sort of go out of the way, and that leaves that does the same thing of like either you surrender when you're fully sort of alert and you really deeply surrender and you get out of the way, or you get tired and get out of the way and it'll come in. You know what I mean? It's always looking to come in. It's always lapping at the door there, it seems. And any opportunity to come in and do work, it does. But yeah, it seems really, really intense in that respect of it. It's a dissolution of your own identity. It can be totally gone at times, and it's a total trance state. I don't know how you want to articulate that, you know what I mean? But it's a really sort of transcendental space. And that was really, yeah, really sort of intense, and still is in me, that process. But it seems what you said earlier is interesting to me in terms of what is it fundamentally. I sort of more and more get the vibe that this is how we were. Do you know what I mean? Like much more of that movement and much more of that relationship with the sacred. And do you know what I mean? Because now, from looking back at how I was, it seemed like I was artificially stiff, almost like an existential sort of elbows in, tucked sort of proper Victorian. Do you know what I mean? Like a really sort of constrained. Whereas I think that there would have been much more movement and we shake it off. You know what I mean? When we encounter those things in life, we naturally move and shake it off, and the body shakes it off. But we've sort of become so intellectual and in the mind and constipated in a way that seems like a really stark transition, but really it was much more embodied previously. Do you know what I mean? And what we are in now is a much more alien. Everyone's really stiff and suppressing all of their movements and traumatized and blocked and guarded, and do you know what I mean? Versus that sort of dancing in the wind, swaying with, like, nature isn't like that. Nothing else in nature, if a dog gets something on it or has a rough experience, it shakes it off straight away. You know what I mean? There's no hesitation. So does that sort of resonate? Is this back? It is our natural state in some sense, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Kundalini is basically, I don't know the word God, but it's the divine waking up within us, or it's already awake because it's running functions within our body, but it surges and it sort of fills the body, and as appears to me, it just sort of keeps going. There's a flow. And yes, the body becomes less rigid, less contracted. If you look at saints and sages, most of their bodies, there's a softness that,
Childlike. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
there's a softness,
yeah,
as you say, people in their intellect, the head's strong and the body's just like an afterthought, a very sort of stiff, contracted form, contracted from trauma and stress.
yeah,
So, yeah, the body softens, the psyche softens, but what this divine waking up within us is to shift our consciousness, ultimately to shift our consciousness to ego identity falling away. This is the evolutionary process where
yeah,
we become one with everything. The person falls away, and the divine fills the being. And so there's not that contracted ego identity or doer anymore. There's still a body, mind, and a life, because we've still got impressions that we have to work out, or we wouldn't have to be born.
yeah,
But we've become more and more of this hollow bone as Kundalini enlightens us. We become a light being.
yeah,
You can feel the light coming out of people where Kundalini has done her work, and
yeah,
it's like the snakes. They come, and above the crown chakra, you have visions of that as it's clearing your system, and
yeah,
can shake the body around to shake all that contraction off, to remove trauma, to remove impressions. And then there's that beautiful refining part where our body forms into mudras, or there'll be goddesses coming into our body and dancing us. So
yeah,
it's like one step after all the trauma is leaving us, or most
yeah,
of it. Often we still go back to what's stuck.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but there's a flow and an informative nature of the divine through the mudras, through the dance poses,
yeah.
through the sounds. Yeah, yeah. Just
And that pattern of gross blockages to more and more refined, that's definitely been my experience. Like early on, there was so much to work through that it felt like such a backlog, and the visceral physicality of it was crazy. Like I remember the night where it woke up in the afternoon at this meditation retreat. That night was like my head was on a cement mixer, just like all of this tension and things in my neck, and my body just going through all of this like multi-point. I let it run for like, it was like 2 days. You know what I mean? Of just constant, and there was these distinct points, like 4 or 5 of them, of really gross blockages that were really excruciating to work through. I remember one was my left arm jammed up behind my back and laying on this thing, and it was like heart, you know what I mean, this side of like a really guarded, and to let that down and let that go was probably the most painful thing that I've ever done. And when it finally melted away, my body shook up to down, head to toe, and I cried and laughed. And you know what I mean? There was these points of really gross blockages, which were like big plexuses of big highways that were, you know, fully closed down for a long time. And then it seems to get more and more refined, where now it almost is like a dance. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of this folding mudras and different things, and it moves energy over the surface and around, and it seems to sometimes be able to want to do it with other people and different things. Like it's turned a lot more of a refined process, and it'll do stuff now where, you know, it'll just have, you know, it'll just be doing delicate things that I don't know what's going on, you know what I mean, with my left hemisphere and my intellectual mind, but my body just does things and it's a lot more refined. There still is it feels like a lot of blockages to clear, in the sense of it still wants to do a lot of these yoga postures and hips and different things, and there's still pain points, but it feels like a lot of those gross blockages went early on, and then it became more about lengthening and getting it to the point where, and this goes on to my next point of, it seems to me that I had no idea how embodied this process was. Like if I go back to when I first tried to meditate, I was really sensitive and didn't have the best childhood and things like that. I remember the first time I sat to meditate, I nearly had a panic attack. Like just embodying myself for a second was like, holy crap. Like I could feel all the thoughts and all the tension, and just being aware of it was unbelievably almost re-traumatizing. You know what I mean? Just to be in myself for a second. And then now I can sit and, you know, at so much peace and stillness, and it'll move me into those spots. And I'm so confident in the process now that, you know, I can sit in stillness in the dark for 12 hours if I need to, and go to all the most uncomfortable spots, because physically as well as psychologically, they're inextricably linked in some way, where, you know what I mean? You lean into this spot in your hip that is the most painful spot in your body, and that in there is some of the uncomfortable trauma, and you know what I mean? It's all in there, you know what I mean? And it seems to sort of come out bit by bit as those impressions, as you're talking about, or sanskaras, or whatever they are. And in, you know, every tradition's got a different way of framing them, but those imprints really stick in the body. And was that your experience? You know what I mean? Like inhabiting your body early on was near impossible because of how much it wasn't a nice place to be. And then as this stuff works through the body, it almost like it allows you to sit deeper in the body, which deepens your awareness. You know what I mean? Like it's like as you can be more in the body, the actual experience changes. You know what I mean? Of the viscerality, or like the reality changes, because you can embody more consciousness as there's less blockages in the body, in lockstep, in a way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. I spent, you know, the first probably 50 years of my life dissociated, so I couldn't actually live in my body because it was, you know, in fight or flight, and there was a soup of sensations in my body. Most of us distract from that. We'll reach for a drink, a drug, a screen, food, you know, when we sit
Anything.
still.
Yeah.
Yeah, still, it's like, oh, I can't actually, oh, there's too much here. And it's sort of unconscious. It's an unconscious thing, but there's a feeling of, I need to reach something to distract because the sensations that are residing in my system are too much. It's overwhelming. So we either reach for something outside of ourselves to sort of soothe and go under the radar, or we do a trauma healing journey so that we can embody. And on the awakening path, you know, we have the head awakening, shifting consciousness, last dry awareness, person falls away, heart awakening, unity consciousness. And I feel like when the body has worked through the trauma, all that expanded consciousness can then reside in the belly of the body as well as everywhere. But we can actually come home to the body and live in there. And that's why I say to a lot of people that to come to me, meditation isn't right for everyone in the beginning because it's uncomfortable, unpleasant to sit with that sensation of soot. You'd be better off perhaps tremoring out some trauma first, and then the trauma's tremored out, and perhaps the Kundalini will ignite if you're on a spiritual path, and then the body not only becomes habitable, but it becomes a divine space of, it's like the cells are full of bliss
Yeah.
eventually. All that informing of the mudras and the dakinis and the beings coming into the body. The body is alive with the divine, and it feels beautiful, I mean, I've still got pains and I've still got parts of trauma, but the overall sense of the body it's like an effervescent. And it's, the Kundalini stuff steadies, once everything is moved. If I sit in meditation or if we're in a retreat or something and we're chanting, my hands will go into mudra positions and things. And sometimes the amrita will come down the back of the throat, just making it more delicious and divine. So it does just refine and refine. But the beginning is really quite busy and it really is releasing trauma. Yeah, it's a lot of...
And so you had that process too of those gross sort of blockages coming out that felt like really big releases, and then slowly they get less and less sort of thing. Was that in your case too?
Yeah. And I would say I did a lot with my TRE practice too.
So you did that before the TRE, before the Kundalini sort of came online?
Yeah. But, had, verbal utterances and rapid breathing patterns like breath. I don't do breath work, but breath work patterns. And
it was working through its stuff in its own way, even then, before it was, that
were, really quite dramatic, and years of just kriyas, releasing kriyas, even though I was also practicing TRE. But I must say a lot of my trauma came out in the conscious TRE space, and that's where, we're not overwhelming and traumatizing our system more because we're regulating the amounts. I wonder sometimes when people are coming out of freeze, they're doing too much, and it's really just re-traumatizing the system.
Because there can be too much, even with the Kundalini, because it's an onrushing sort of force. It's like a tsunami, and it seems like early on, because I had no conception of any of this, I got kicked out of that retreat for moving. You know what I mean? And he told me not to move, and I said get stuffed because I'm you know what I mean? It felt so sacred and divine. So I went home and sort of finished the retreat at home, and I was putting in these like 12-hour days, letting my body move, and I would notice I would get to about 7-8 hours and I would get nauseous every time, and it was like almost like my body saying too much. You know what I mean? And so I didn't know. I didn't know how long it was going to last. You know what I mean? Naively, I thought, oh yeah, this might be a week or two. You know what I mean? Until everything's all cleared out or whatever. And I didn't even know it was Kundalini. I just wanted to let this process unfold because it felt super sacred. And early on, there was a lot of visions, and it was like a very intense, different space. You know what I mean? And so, but I noticed that there was a point that was too much, and I would reliably hit that 8 hours and I'd get this total system nausea, and it was almost like too much energy had been moved. And I think that's where you're getting into the realm of you could re-traumatize or even damage your physiology because the Kundalini doesn't really, even though it's hard. It does seem to have a real wisdom of the body, but it seems to want to push as far as it possibly can. And, as I said, even into sleep and everything like that. But in the same vein, it also doesn't seem like it will hurt you. You know what I mean? Like I've had it really... Early on, I was terrified for a time because it seemed like it was going to damage me. It was doing these really crazy things and, folding me in half and legs over my head, over my legs, and grabbing my arm around here and doing these crazy locks. And there was times where it altered the physiology in the sense of like, there's a ton of stuff with my neck. I think that's where I hold a lot of my tension, and probably most people do. You know what I mean? Neck and shoulder blades and things like that. And I had, it was doing a lot of stuff with my neck, and it would like, there was parts where parts of my face went numb. Like it was almost like reefing nerves out of fascia and things like that. And it was like, there was some temporary transient disruption. It ended up being fine, and I'm much better for it now. But you know what I mean? It's right on the edge of what you like, you can, to trust in the process. You know what I mean? And that it's a wild sort of ride in terms of that. But it never did damage me. You know what I mean? Even though it does things that are so elaborate and seem super dangerous. You know what I mean? Like if I let myself roll there now for an hour, I would get into positions where people would be like, you shouldn't do, like, you're going to break your neck. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy. And it'll still do that to me. You know what I mean? Like legs over my head and really releasing the last little bit of air out of your lungs so it can get, you know, really close, and it'll do all of these things, including breathing patterns and holding the breath for a couple of minutes while it's doing something where that it doesn't want any air in the lungs, and all sorts of crazy stuff. But yeah, did you have elements like that too, where you were a bit overwhelmed and like by the power of the body and how much that process unfolded?
Yeah, well, I suppose because of TRE, we learn to regulate so that we're not overwhelming and re-traumatizing.
Okay.
We just release, you know, like when I teach people, I teach them to release 5 to 10 minutes at a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they dissociate, they're not there, and they're really not in healing space because they've overwhelmed their nervous system longer. So
Yeah.
I have the background of letting a lot of trauma out in a
Controlled manner.
fashion, yeah, so
Yeah.
that I let some out and then I rest and integrate for a few days, and then I'll let some more out.
Yeah.
Find that's the healing space. For
Yeah.
me,
It's like exposure therapy almost. Like you don't want to go too far and scare the shit out of people. You know what I mean? It has to be a manageable bite-sized dose. Yeah.
and it's in that dose, it's in that integration is where the healing happens. If we're just letting more and more out, it's overwhelming for the system. So we're not healing, we're actually overwhelming ourselves. So
Yeah.
I'm a big fan for regulation and, of course, allowing Kundalini. The biggest one for me was the big burn through at Muji's ashram that
Yeah.
time. There's no stopping that. I mean, that one did go.
Was it a bit
Uh,
scary for you at the time, or you just had you
it was
surrendered to it?
magnificent, really. It was quite
Yeah.
magnificent. It was scary
Yeah.
for people around me. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. But it just, you know, rose and the noise and the energy and my body flicked and flicked. And, you know, obviously some people at the ashram were okay with it, which was great. And I knew what was happening because you know, I've been into spirituality, been a spiritual seeker since I was 21, I think.
Hmm.
So I sort of knew, well, this is the Kundalini really making some headway through my system. And I shook and flicked for hours and hours, and the people there gave me water, and I just wanted to lay in a temple, and I just laid, and I couldn't have stopped it. And I just let it go, you know, and it was
Hmm.
magnificent. I had the white light and the expanded consciousness. But I would say here I see a difference between expanded consciousness and dissociation. And a lot of people confuse in meditation and also in tremoring dissociation for transcended states.
Hmm.
Yeah. So transcended states might be you've got white light, or you know your person's not there, but you're not just dissociated from your body. You're actually the wholeness. You're the God state. You're the natural state. And in a way, even though it's expanded in here, there's also an embodied consciousness in the body at the same time. So
And
yeah,
it's
I feel
tricky because a lot of people that are I think that there's that the people who come to this sort of thing are sensitive, And so that dissociative mechanism is a really worn path for them. You know what I mean? Because sensitive people, the only way they get by in the world is with dissociation. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And look, it's helpful, it's handy, and yet when we heal the trauma, we can actually embody. And
Yeah.
that is a beautiful way to be a human being, to be embodied on planet Earth with a shifted consciousness. That's probably a good place to be on the path. But I feel like I get a lot of clients online and they say my body is tremoring, it's Kundalini, it's happening for, like 10, 12 hours a day. They're not well, they're not healing, they're exhausted. And so I go, it could be Kundalini and it could just be the spontaneous movement. Now, my spontaneous movement that I call a TRE process, which is actually just my body's unfreezing.
Yeah.
If I let it go now, I could tremor here. So that's spontaneous movement. Now, I could let that go for days on end.
Yeah.
It's always there. It's always willing and ready to unwind fascia, unwind contracted muscle. But if
Yeah.
I did for even 2 hours, I would probably find myself dissociated and overwhelmed. I've gone past my point. So I, probably tremor in the early days. I'm a bit lazier now. But I would tremor 3 times a week. And after the first 3 months, I built it up to 20 minutes, And that for me was a place of regulation and healing. And I felt my nervous system, after a year or two of that, come out of the activation of fight, flight, fawn, freeze.
Yeah.
To a more baseline state. It could activate and come back down. Whereas
Yeah.
the past part of my life, I felt like I was living in the loop.
Yeah. Just stuck on. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No cortex, no enjoyment in life, no groundedness.
Yeah.
No.
And so it almost seems like that's the spiritual path in a way, is being more and more embodied, which allows more of the spirit or God or whatever you want to call it to flow through you. Do you know what I mean? In a sense, it seems like that. Like the more embodied you can get, the more space there is in that system. But it's a bit of a paradox, because it seems like the more space there is, which makes more room for you to get out of the way. You know what I mean? But somehow that is the beautiful sort of state. Because what comes to mind for me is people who go through just a head path. You know what I mean? I feel like almost this is a different path. And some people that they go through just a head path, and it's really tons of meditation and silent retreat and focusing the mind sharper and sharper and more concentrated and more concentrated. Eventually, those people hit the Kundalini stuff, but you have to hit it one way or the other. And it seems like when they hit it later on, I've heard accounts that really stuck out to me and were interesting of their meditation process started to feel automatic. So all of their chakras and everything burst open, like they were so concentrated that maybe if you get that concentrated and then when you finally do turn the awareness towards the body, it just burns it all up instantly. You know what I mean? If you've got 10 years of laser concentration. But I've heard accounts from those people where they say that everything bursts open quickly for them, and it's not as a slow process, an embodied gradual process, but at the same time, then their process becomes automatic. And there's something about the automaticity that is there with the embodied process from early on. Do you know what I mean? Like they report past that point, once all of the sort of chakras opened up and they really became embodied, they weren't meditating anymore. They were just being meditated. You know what I mean? And it seems like if going through the body is a separate path, and you sort of let more and more of it in as you go, and then eventually when you get out of the way, all roads lead to Rome, and you are really concentrated. You know what I mean? Like when you're out of the way and you're embodied, you naturally concentrate, because I think what you're saying, it's so pleasant to be present and feel the vitality of your cells, and feel spirit move into you, and you radiate that, and it radiates into you, and you become concentrated. You know what I mean? Paradoxically, whether you do the 10 years of the mind meditating and then blast everything away in the body in an afternoon, and explode to the cosmos, or you go 10 years of gradually through the body, they lead to the same place, which is you have both the focus and the embodied. It's both. You know what I mean? And I think it's really interesting that some people seem drawn into this path, and some people maybe would have never got there unless it was for these other paths. But I've always really felt like the embodied approach is much more aligned with me. And I think maybe being a sensitive person, that's because you're so sensitive, it's like the volume is higher. You know what I mean? And so when you actually can get in there in the body, that presence is so beautiful and so peaceful and so addictive in a way that it naturally develops its own momentum. Do you know what I mean? You didn't want to be disembodied. That was a side effect of protecting yourself. But once your environment is regulated, and you're not a child, or you're not exposed to things that are constantly putting you in fight or flight, it's so beautiful and peaceful there that you would never choose to be in the mind again. You know what I mean? And so it's just letting that more in and letting it gain its own momentum. But I really see an interesting relationship between whatever path you take. They both lead to beautifully present and concentrated and at peace in the body. But one way or the other, you're going to get there if you take the path to its conclusion. You know what I mean? Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, I feel like Shakti Ma will continue. A lot of people have head awakenings, which is when a person falls away and it's vast and dry and free. And so there's not a lot of embodiment there. And yet that's a really important stage, so that when the embodiment happens, it's that vast consciousness that embodies. It's not the person embodying. Yeah. I feel like that presence or vast spaciousness within the body can only reside in the body when the contraction is freed, when the trauma is freed. It's like all that contraction of the ego identity holds the beingness that's always there within all of us. It sort of covers it over. But once the contraction and trauma is removed, the body softens, the psyche softens, and up and swell it. So there's different paths, there's different ways, and some people you'll see. Often there's some spiritual teachers online, and you can see, yes, they've had an awakening, but you can see it's just a head awakening. The body is rigid, they're not embodied, they're really sort of doing non-dual speak, and they have had an experience, and they have had perhaps a head awakening, but they feel, and you feel it's at these different stages, it's so done, but there's more. There's a heart awakening to unity consciousness. There's the gut awakening to embodied vast consciousness, and like being the hollow bone. And then it seems we're put to service when that's clear. And then there'll be and ... I don't know what the next stage is, because I'm not there yet. That's not happening. Yeah.
What do you think in terms of, like, because all throughout my sort of path, I've always had those I've close with and close friends and family and stuff like that. I've always sort of wanted to lead people along with me. You know what I mean? Of finding I've found this thing and this really works, but whereas I feel like once this Kundalini process happened to me, it bifurcated, and it became a bit of like, it's nothing I can recommend or whatever. That's why I was really interested in the TRE, because I think that might be the stopgap, because not only can I not transmit this to people, I'm not sure I would want to. Do you know what I mean? In the sense of it is a bit unregulated and intense. like that, I wouldn't want to put someone through what I've been through in the last 2 years if there was a better way of doing it. You know what I mean? Even if I could, even though knowing that it would lead to a beautiful place, it's be like exploding someone's life. You know what I mean? And so the is the TRE for you that process? And it seems like it is, and that's why I'm looking into it. You know what I mean? And I want to know more about it. Is that I want to be able to lead people through this awakening through the body. It seems like you need something like that. You know what I mean? Because the Kundalini can be not transmit. It's more like getting struck by lightning, I feel like. You know what I mean? And it is a bit rare in terms of, when I was at that meditation retreat, they would have seen thousands of students. They had no idea what was happening to me. You know what I mean? And so it's only every so often that someone has and I think it's probably a sensitive person, probably someone that suffered a lot, yada, yada, yada. There's a list there, you know what I mean? But under the right conditions, that person will be struck by lightning and will have an automatic sort of process. But in terms of things like gentle, reliable paths, similar to, the head path of meditation, longer and longer, then you go on your silent retreats and whatever. For the embodied path, do you think that starts with TRE and a regulated amount of TRE, or is that the only one that's there, or is there other ways to tune into the body and begin,
It's not the only one, but it's our body's natural one. Like TRE is a technique to invoke what is naturally within us to release tension. So as life happens to us, we either expand, we're neutral, or we contract. And it's in the contraction and the freeze that the trauma is stored in the system, and our body changes, our nervous system is impacted. This spontaneous movement, whether through TRE or some other means, there's all different modalities, but TRE is a great one. It's life-changing. It's regulated. You're releasing stress. You're releasing trauma. Your body is shifting and changing. It's great for your meditation because if you've done a well-regulated session of TRE, your mind is automatically calm.
Yeah.
So for people to do a tremor and then a meditate, in the early stages, it's beautiful. And obviously after all this, life becomes meditation. You don't have to anymore. Everything is on that level. But for the beginning, absolutely. Releasing trauma, I feel like, is a path to spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
So if you're on a spiritual path, definitely do the TRE because it's opening, it's taking the armor off us, it's healing our nervous system. In the healing of the nervous system, we can start to feel into our truest nature when all that noise is gone, and there's a sense of safety. We can start to feel deeper and deeper into what's already here, which is our true nature. And then that can start to surface because everything else is quieting down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of us have cut off connection to spirit or their body or whatever you want to say so early on to protect themselves that they've forgotten about all the upside and the positive, you know what I mean? And so they really aren't in touch with the fact of how beautiful it can be to be embodied and pleasurable, you know what I mean? Like just to be present and to be like, you know what I mean? When you're present and you can feel a cool breeze blowing in and you smell some flowers blossoming and you see the full moon, that is transcendental, you know what I mean? And that is a really intense experience, you know what I mean? And we're always looking for all these intense experiences, head mediated, you know what I mean? I want to go on a roller coaster, but when you let the channels open in the body, it's ecstatic, you know what I mean? There's a slow hum of sort of peace and pleasure, but there's ecstatic, you know what I mean? Of you can get swept up in the energy of a full moon or whatever it might be, and that can be an ecstasy, you know what I mean? And people aren't familiar with any of that because they're shut off with it and they're just bobbling around on the head, and they don't want to feel the pain, which is there, but almost directly proportional as some of that pain goes, pleasure and peace can fill that and in lockstep, you know what I mean? To the point where maybe you've still got a bit here, but if you're very embodied and spacious and you can tune into that, there's a lot of pleasure and peace and ecstasy and all of those things. You know what I mean? It's ecstatic to be alive and be a human. You know what I mean? You go out in the sun and you eat a good orange. That's that's wild if you're actually there for it. You know what I mean? But it's yeah.
And you can enjoy that when you're not in your thinking mind,
Yeah.
past, future,
Yeah.
dredging past, worrying about future. If you're actually just with your orange in the sun, it's a magnificent existence. But
Yeah.
yeah, TRE and the healing trauma can be a path, I feel, to total spiritual awakening,
Yeah.
which is person falling away, which is heart opening to unity consciousness, which is embodying this system, this body-mind
Yeah.
system, and allowing, eventually this life, next life, whenever the Kundalini will clear the whole system through and enlighten it. Other
Yeah.
ways, I'm surprised that people aren't all tremoring. Like, in ancient cultures, they tremored to the drums on the full moon. The whole
Yeah.
tribe would releasing that month's trauma, like a
Yeah.
download of just letting it go. We really need it in the West. Everyone's stressed. No one's got inner peace, or very few,
Yeah.
and all related to our nervous system being stuck in a loop.
Yeah.
We can fix that. So on one level, you can be a more regulated person, so your relationships go better, your cortex is online. Just for general people, even not being on a spiritual awakening path, they just become a more regulated human and their life becomes more enjoyable.
Yeah.
And then down under the regulation, you start to tap into the beingness if you're on a spiritual path and discovering who you really are.
Yeah.
Other ways, I would say, I do something called transformational body work. It's a form of
Mhm.
deep body work. So the tremoring is releasing the armor by your natural mechanism. Transformational body work or deep tissue body work is talking into the fascia and the muscle and, moving, opening the system, which also does the same thing. And often on the bodywork table, people's body will start to tremor and help the process.
So you're sort of leading them in there and getting things moving, and once you start doing that, you're encouraging them to, all right, it's okay if you move, and then it's sort of like a guided TRE, almost like in terms of getting in there and letting it get going.
Perfect. That's perfect, Brady. Some people also need another organism to release. So, not all body workers will have people tremoring, but perhaps if the body worker is supremely, has presence there, the organism will feel safe and start to open.
Yeah.
So, I've seen body
Because they'd be
workers.
scared. Some people might be scared to do that on their own. And so having someone there that there's creating a space where this is okay and I'm here with you, that can help those people.
Yeah, and look, TRE is a self-healing technique and it works for a lot of people. But some people, mammals, we've been, probably traumatized by people. And so there's something beautiful about being with another mammal in the healing
Yeah.
part of you. And some people, they can open with that. So that can work equally well, and together the two of them are sublime ways of letting go
Yeah.
of who we've become, and
Yeah.
who probably, it doesn't work. For me, the ego identity never worked. It was always a dread, and the nervous system was always activated, and there wasn't, what people describe of as heaven on earth. And that's
Yeah.
that calm
Yeah.
mind, sitting with your orange and the sun and the cells, full of light and effervescence and
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a beautiful sort of embodied path, and I'm glad I came across your Tree, because that it sort of filled in a gap for me, because on that vein, with the working with others, I've experimented with it, and I've had moments with my wife, and the process, it seems it's hard for me to conceptualize with my left hemisphere, but it can do what it does with me on her as well. You know what I mean? If I put my hands on her, it's almost like it makes a circuit, and it'll just immediately start going to the place that it needs to go to. But it'll do all sorts of things to build up energy. There's a bit of a tantric element in my own experience, and in there, in terms of the body will build up. It can pull on whatever reservoir for energy that it needs. You know what I mean? So that could be whatever, and it'll build that up and then direct that into the area sometimes when you need a bit more energy and things like that. But I noticed when doing that with my wife that it would go to a painful spot, and then I would feel her clench up and tense up, and I'd be like, "You have to release into that," and she'd be like, "But this is painful," and then it just made me realize, like, oh, like, what element is there? Like, I was so ready for that through all of my suffering that it was like, pain, or bring it on. You know what I mean? Like, if this can help. The condition that I'm in all the time is pain. You know what I mean? And so I was wanting to embrace that, but it just made me realize, like, that moment, and I was like, no, it is painful. It's probably some of the worst pain that I've been through, and I didn't have a way to make that, to sell that for her. You know what I mean? And then it sort of just ended that process, and then I sort of got to thinking, do I even really know, like, if I could, I don't think I would activate this energy in her. Do you know what I mean? It has to be its own embodied process for each individual. And I just wonder what your thoughts are there in terms of working with people. Obviously, you've had a lot more time to cook with it and sit. I'm still, coming up 2.5 years since I exploded, and so it's still early days, but I'm just wondering how you sit with that. You know what I mean? In terms of what are you trying to offer people, and is it just getting them into their own mechanisms? And because it seemed to me that if she was fully on board, I would have been able to do what it does for me for her. But is that even? I don't know, maybe a little bit of that in her own process would get going, or, I just don't know. I'm inexperienced, but I just did it for a test, and I was just curious what your thoughts are there in terms of others' paths and how ours can intersect with theirs.
Well, others part, it's interesting, isn't it? Okay. Someone described Kundalini and the sharing of Kundalini to me a long time ago, about wet wood and dry wood. And this friend of mine, she said she felt like she was wet wood, like, and my system was a dry wood. So, I've been doing, bhakti, loving Maya Baba since I was 21. Service with the family, quite conscientious and committed. Loving God. What else? I didn't meditate because I was too full of sensation. I couldn't meditate at the time. What makes you a dry twig ready to combust, so that when someone comes along with Shaktipat, someone, I feel like I got Shaktipat really off Mujina. He doesn't say he gives that, but, my stick or body was dry, or my system was like dry wood. Remember, he looked at me across the room, and my head flung back,
Yep.
He held my hand at one point, and my hand went yellow ochre color. It was weird. And I couldn't sleep for 3 days. The energy was so much. And then the next day I went to the ashram, and I had the full steam train come through. So I would say it was already rising Kundalini for many, many years, but I feel it was going up the wrong path. So I received Shaktipat, and up it came. So I feel like there's many ways that Kundalini can combust. Shaktipat is one of them.
Have you found that in working with people, anyone else has come online from your work with them, or not so much in the Kundalini sense, but more in the TRE being led into the process sense, or how has that gone?
Possibly my clients, I say to them that come here for spiritual awakening, do TRE,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and do the body work, clear the body, and I must confess some of them have, spontaneously Kundalini has arisen within them after some
Yep.
certain work. So maybe those first things of the body work and the TRE are sort of drying the wood, ready to
Yep.
combust.
Yeah.
And I've had people come across the lawn here and have Kundalini awaken, It's like
Yep.
sacred silence, or perhaps someone that has it. Um, I don't feel uh, like impelled to hand it on. I feel like everyone in their own time, they'll be they'll be doing the right work. They'll be on their spiritual path, and it will happen.
Yep.
And I feel that if they've cleared their trauma first by doing some work first, it's only going to be a better ride for them when it happens.
For sure. Yeah, that couldn't subtract from the experience. I don't think it would just have less of the gross stuff to work through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Won't subtract. I think it'll just make it, you'll be a dry stick of wood to combust
Yep.
more, perhaps.
Yep.
I don't say that I give Shakti part to people. Sometimes it spreads like wildfire because they're dry and it's flowing.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
encourage
No.
people to take a healing journey, really, first.
Yeah.
Also, too, people get acquisitive. I want Kundalini, and as you say, well, you may not want it when you get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This I want Kundalini. It's so Western. It's so acquisitive.
Yeah, I'll take a
In
Big
the
Mac
past,
and the Kundalini combo on the side. Yeah.
basically, I want, but the
Yeah.
reality is, when Kundalini comes, the person gets moved out of the system, and there's a whole transformation. So the
Yeah. Yeah. You
person,
might not be there to get it. You might get it, but you might be gone. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that's really interesting, I think, for people to contemplate. Yeah.
Mm.
And
That's more than you bargained for sure. If anything is, yeah, yeah.
that's what you're after, spiritual awakening and a shift in
Mm.
consciousness. Yeah, fine, do the
Yeah.
work for that,
Yeah.
do the bhakti, love God, study the scriptures, do the meditation, do the healing work, feed your spiritual path so that you make yourself a dry wood ready to combust, if that's what you
Yeah.
want. But I feel like
Uh,
Westerners are a bit acquisitive, and they want a better person, or they want cities, or I'm
yeah.
wanting. It's not
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good analogy, and I think that there's lots of things that can dry out that wood. I think a big one is probably just time spent suffering. There's some element of just the time spent suffering seems to really dry you out better than a lot of things, because there's just so much pain and so much that it can make you a bit sort of world weary, and then that's a great position to surrender from there. You know what I mean? Versus when things are really going well, and you're the CEO and the BMW and everything like that. I think a lot of the times those people have a harder path to come back around, because they're like, it was so good over here. You know what I mean? Versus people who are a bit more pain and trauma and stuck on in that fight or flight. We're really more dry wood in the sense of anything that could that shift the state. It has to be better than this. You know what I mean? And it is, thankfully. And it's that sort of I think that's at play there for sure.
Absolutely. I love what you just said then. Absolutely. And I found, I got to a point in my life where my ego identity, it wasn't working. It was just pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it anymore. And I even
Hmm.
said to, you know, you can say it to pure consciousness, or you might have a form of God. I can't do it anymore. You do it, and it was a
Yeah.
total surrender, like, yeah. But you're right.
Yeah.
I love what even Jim Carrey said. Kept going and going, with the fame and the cars, and he came to the point where he had everything he wanted, and there was still no inner peace or satisfaction. There were
Yeah.
no stars swimming in light, for him. So, yeah, I think at some point we all come to this. It's just our evolutionary process, and Kundalini is part of that evolutionary process of finding out who we really are.
Yeah.
We're cast out from the on point, and we have millions of lives, and in some life we go, like, enough of this. I want to know who
Yeah.
I am. And often it's relief from this ego identity.
Yeah. Yeah, but it can't come from. There's a bit of a paradox there because it can't come from the wanting something more in terms of a better state, wanting a better state. It comes through the surrender channel. You know what I mean? It seems subtle, the difference, but the difference is huge. You know what I mean? In terms of I want pleasure and powers and peace or whatever versus I surrender. You know what I mean? Like I throw in the towel. You know what I mean? And then it flows through. It's almost like that's the sincere version of wanting. And all roads do lead to Rome, it seems, via different channels. Because Jim Carrey's a great example of that sort of. He's had that good line. I wish everyone could achieve everything that they want to achieve so that they could find out that it's not going to do it. You know what I mean? And some people come to that earlier than others. It's through pain, it's through whatever, it's through trauma, or it can be through a variety of different means, but it always leads back to the same point of that really humble surrender and authentic surrender. And then in rushes, the body's natural mechanisms and that space and, God or spirit or however you want to frame it. And it's a beautiful path. And there it sort of takes its own momentum, but it really does require you to take your hands off the wheel, I think. Yeah. All right. Well, anything else, Tree? Tell me a little bit about your retreat center place down there that you've got going on. Is that something you're doing at the moment, or you have people come there, or?
Yeah, I have retreats and I have people come for healing work. So I teach both TRE and I perform transformational body work on people. And both of that is to just, heal the nervous system, take the armor off, open the body to who they truly are.
Yep.
It's very successful work. I would like to say people come and they say, "Oh, I've got a block," and I'm like, just one. Well,
Yep.
you're lucky. I think it's a quick thing. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
Just in my left elbow here. If you could just get this one out, and I'll be on my way. Yeah.
It can take a few years, but absolutely worth it. It's not easy.
Yep.
But the healing. So I do healing here, and I also do spiritual awakening retreats where we work with nature. So nature is also another catalyst for, feeling our oneness, dissolving into oneness, dissolving
For sure.
ego shell. So we work
Yep.
with nature, we work with the elements. I've got a bit of a shamanic background, so nature's very important for me. And we read the masters from different masters, so there's different avenues, all the same truth. Like as you say, all roads lead to Rome. So we have a really great time, and
That sounds awesome. Yeah, and it seems to be that it seems to me that there needs to be more of that sort of thing because you've got a lot of the Vipassana and things like this, and I think there needs to be more embodied pathways. You know what I mean? Because just for certain people, that's just not the right pathway, as you're saying. You know what I mean? If you're traumatized and like I started, and you go on a Vipassana retreat, you're gonna it's not gonna be good. You know what I mean? Like that sort of level of meditation. In the context of barely being able to sit at all. Some people think, I can't sit. Maybe what I need is to go and do 10 silent days. I don't think so. You know what I mean? Well, maybe you might get something, but you're going to fall apart first. You know what I mean? And it's going to be a really sort of rough path, and you're going to have to take the system fully apart and hopefully be able to put it back together in a way that makes a bit of sense. But I think that there needs to be more of these embodied paths, gradual through the nervous system, finding back that safety, coming back home to the body, and then letting that process take its own shape from there. You know what I mean? But with a bit of guidance in the sense of leading people to just the right amount and not re-traumatizing themselves, and leading them in. And I think nature is a really underrated element of that. Like, I had experiences where I'm in the forest here, and I had me and a bunch of a couple of mates went down near my creek, and we just had a couple days fasting on our own in nature, and just the amount that came out of that. I had a friend reporting he had experiences from when he was like 8 years old coming up. You know what I mean? And it just clicked for me in that instance. I was like, oh, that's when you would have stopped processing. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's when you would have, like, you've got a backlog that long in terms of inflow versus outflow. You know what I mean? And so it's like, in nature and being present, and spending time away from distractions, you cut off that constant inflow valve, which we've all got onto the max of Netflix and screens and this and distractions and that, and no outflow occurs. But if as soon, a day or two of cutting off that inflow, and the outflow is stuff from way back that you would have naturally processed in the natural world in the absence of those distractions. But it was mind blowing to me to see how far back that can go. And it really shocked me. You know what I mean? Of like how, like, just a little bit of time without that inflow, and it just starts. You know what I mean? And then you've got some work to do in terms of that. And nature's really powerful for that.
Yeah, and just also too, just for supporting the system during this healing journey. So,
Yep.
and unless there's a hurricane or nature's really raging, nature
Yep.
in general, just the elements, the water, the earth, the air, the fire, sitting by a fire,
Yep.
wind, unless it's raging, can actually soothe the human nervous system.
For sure. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
A-
Yeah.
And,
Even the complexity of the patterns visually, when you look out into the forest, it looks more complex, but it's soothing. You know what I mean? That's all that, Japanese research, nature bathing, and being in cities raises your cortisol. You know what I mean? Being in nature, despite the fact that it's more complex, it's what you've evolved to process. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it reflects, we reflect ourselves in nature. It can become like a mirror, and you can really dissolve that crystallized ego identity shell because of the magnificence of it. It just cracks you open. And
Yeah.
I find it tragic that we have to be taught how to forest bathe and go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a bit,
Find it
it's a bit scary, isn't it?
removed ourselves that if we have to do that, but obviously we have to, and perhaps that's the beginning of coming back, because we are also nature.
Yeah.
Humans are also nature, and I feel like, yeah, you're right, we've gotten into our head. I haven't, because I'm not an intellectual person, so I've sort of
Yeah.
escaped that, but yeah, I find it tragic we have to be taught, but look, at least there's that for people that need to be
Better than
taught.
nothing. Yeah. Yeah.
At least it's waking that back up in us. We are nature, we're in nature, we're part of nature. We have removed ourselves.
Yeah.
So something beautiful about coming back into that. And look, in our retreats, we do that too. We're swimming in the river early in the morning, and we're being with the elements, and it stirs something within us. It stirs
Yeah.
parts of our nature within us. So yeah, nature healing, meditation. You know. For
Yeah.
some people, they're lucky. They have. I feel blessed because Mayor Barbara chose me as a young woman, and to have an avatar for a guru. For me, it makes it easy. It's not. I don't need to learn so much. It's been quite an easy heart path of just loving, and then, as you say, everything evens out. So you might start on a bhakti path, but then you get the knowledge. The knowledge comes in. And those that start on a knowledge path, the heart will eventually open. So
Yeah.
wherever we all start in different ways, depending on our perhaps tendencies in life. But it becomes holistic. And for those spiritual teachers online that are just talking from a head awakening, sometimes the ego claims I've got something, and then they run with it, and so that'll be that for this life probably. It's always
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
beginner's mind and that soft opening, that this is a great mystery and it will keep evolving, and there'll be like a sinking further and further and further. I feel like there's person, presence, and then the absolute,
Yeah.
But the
Yeah,
shift
and
of presence is a wonderful one, because there is inner peace. There's not the psychological suffering of that poor little person trying to keep it all together.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And like you're saying, the mind can get on its own trip pretty easily versus the body. There's a certain humility and bedrock there. Like, you know what I mean? If you get in the body, it's just everything as it is. Versus in the head, there's layers and layers of this, and I'm this, and sent here's it's direct messages, and it's me only, and people get on all sorts of crazy trips in the mind, but the body can't do that to you. You know what I mean? Because it's here and now, and it's felt, and it's always being recreated, like you were talking about earlier, that the cells it's spacious and ephemeral in a way, you know what I mean? It's all blinking in and out of existence in each moment, you know what I mean? So you can't get wrapped up too much in a trip, because that's gone now anyway, you know what I mean? And it's a constant resetting and rechecking mechanism, versus the head has layers and layers and 30 years 50 years of all of this stuff, and it's
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy sort of space, but the body is much calm and simpler, and it's sacred and ancient and wise, and it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, and it's often dismissed. And yes, ultimately, we are consciousness, not the body. The body is the vessel for consciousness, but it's a great indicator, it's a great teacher, and it can even expose who we are if it softens and opens.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's integral in some way. Like, it's like having a radio station, and it's like, uh, yeah, the station is the only thing that's true. It's like, but you still need your radio to tune into it. You know what I mean? And so it's that the body is a deeply important element to that situation. You know what I mean? You don't love your radio station so much that you throw out your radio. You wanna still be able, but you want it on full volume, and you don't want it to be distorted. You want it to be high quality signal, but it's essential.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I love what you said. I love that. I'm going to write that down, because, separate ego identity is really just a distortion.
Yep.
Yeah. And, it's been kind and helpful to us, and it's trying to keep us safe. But,
Yeah. Yeah, it's just doing its best, but and it was trying to protect us, but it didn't know any better. You know what I mean? So it's sweet in its own capacity, as well. And I think that inviting that tenderness in there is helpful. The left versus the right hemisphere. Have you ever looked into any of that, like Ian McGilchrist or anything like? It's a bit of a dense sort of intellectual work, so I don't think it would be exactly your forte. But in terms of the left versus the right, have you considered that? It seems like all of the stuff that we're talking about is moving back towards a right hemisphere mode of being. You know what I mean? It's sort of sacred and visual, and not in the mind, not language.
yeah, I would say that I'm probably very right-brained. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I have
it seems to be from what I've heard from you. Yeah.
right and left brain, because we have a bit of autism come into the family with grandchildren,
Yep.
and some are severely left brain dominant, and I'm
Yep.
probably
Yep.
brain dominant. But I feel like with the settling of the nervous system, my cortex has come online more. So perhaps it's a little bit more balanced now.
It's supposed to be both. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you don't want one or the other, but it's supposed to be the right leads the way, and the left is sort of subservient, and works with the right. But the right is the one that has holistic living systems, body imagery. It actually knows what's going on, and the left is more specific tasks, break things down, language, and all of that sort of thing. There's actually some really interesting stuff there. It's even a bit intellectual for me, in terms of the amount of information there in this Ian McGilchrist book, who wrote The Master and His Emissary, essentially meaning the right is the true master, the left is supposed to be the emissary who serves the master master, but that's flipped in today's culture, and left hemisphere dominates and drives and sort of has taken over. And but there's incredibly interesting stuff in there in terms of the autism and schizophrenia and the left hemisphere, and then the right hemisphere being, we see living things with the right hemisphere. But if you've ever had the experience of being present when something dies, you immediately, as soon as the life transitions out of it, you can see the parts. The left hemisphere comes online. Do you know what I mean? It's like you see it as a whole thing, and then when the life fades out, it's like you can see eyes and legs, and you know, it's a totally different sort of perception. We see living beings, and also, funnily enough, instruments with the right hemisphere, and with the left hemisphere, we see all individual parts. You know what I mean? So there's a ton there, but it seems like the spiritual path, if you want a neurological mapping, is re-empowering that right hemisphere to its rightful place at the top, and then the left hemisphere, it's still there, you can still do those tasks and navigate, but it's changing the balance. And so that's interesting work for people who are inclined to look into that side of things. You know, that's been really mind-blowing for me, but it's right on the edge for me. Like, I've had a couple of goes at the book, and it gets to a point where it's so much information that it swamps even me out, and I love that sort of thing. So it is a bit of a tough thing, but it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is fascinating. The brain is fascinating. I haven't got the capacity or the interest to read that, but if you read it, you can tell me about it one day. But yeah,
Yeah.
I was very right brain, and I'm balancing out my left brain. So this morning with all the technical issues, once upon a time, I would have just probably been in fight and flight and in
Yeah,
tears.
just throwing the computer out the window and said, "Never mind." Yeah,
I can't do this.
yeah,
But
yeah,
this morning I just stuck with it, and we sort of got through there. I didn't quite
yeah,
succeed, but yeah. So I think
yeah,
it is the balance, and it's the
yeah,
balance of heart and hands with the human too. That's Steiner philosophy.
yeah, yeah. That's there, and yeah. Well, I'm glad we persevered this morning, and because it was a great conversation. Tree, is there anything that you want to say to wrap it up, or anything that we should have got onto that we didn't?
Keeps coming in, and I don't know why it needs to be said, but it wants to be said.
Mm-hmm.
Is also to after the clearing out and the enlightening, there's another enlightening process that can occur, and it's descent of grace,
Mm-hmm.
and it's perhaps it's Shiva this way, Shakti this way. It's
Yeah,
it's like the God power coming into the body and filling up from without.
yeah. Once there's some space there, then that comes in. That totally makes sense to me. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like a top-down one as well as a bottom-up. Yeah. And so
yeah,
and people have it in different sequences. We're all got different systems. So some people have that first, and then
yeah.
there's the clear out. My system had the clear out, and then the descents of
Yeah. No, yeah, that's beautiful, and yeah, it's been a great conversation. Really appreciate your time and appreciate you persevering with the technical difficulties. And I've had a great time. I think it was a great conversation. So I think it'll be a good, or it can be a good resource for people in terms of the embodied side of that process. I feel like we talked about a lot there that needed to be threaded together, and I think it's going to be valuable.
Yeah, thanks. Lovely to meet, and thank you for not
Yep.
making me say the story again.
Yeah, yeah. No worries. And yeah, and if people want to find your story, it exists. I'll link it. I'll link your website, and I'll link the other interviews with your whole story and things like that. And I think we got into the heart of it because we were able to skip that. So that's a beautiful thing.
I enjoyed that today. Yeah, thank you.
Yep, that's really good. Thanks, Tree. Appreciate that.
Do well.